Okay. Well, it is 1 o'clock. My name is Tim Selden, and this is Independent School Leaders Forum. My co-host is Dr. Lindsay Pollack from Sarasota University, and our guest this week is Irene Greaves. We are so pleased to have you with us. Lovescaping. I was saying to Lindsay, it reminds me of good old Leo Buscaglia and the
Yeah.
idea of Love 101. So we're
Yes.
glad to have you here.
Thank you
Lindsay,
for
would you
having
like
me.
to introduce our friend Irina? Would you?
Absolutely. I have the utmost respect and admiration for Irene and the work that she has initiated right here in Houston, Texas. She's the founder of Lovescaping and the author of Lovescaping, Building the Humanity of Tomorrow by Practicing Love in Action, as well as a children's book, which my grandson has a copy. The book is I Am a Lovescaper. Not only is Irene an incredible human being, she also holds a master's in education from the University of Pennsylvania and has brought her work to thousands of students, families, educators, and leaders across the United States and beyond, in schools, community organizations, companies, and even correctional facilities. I encourage everyone here after our time together today to check out her TEDx online. And Irene is one of the most powerful keynote speakers that I've ever heard, and she has one powerful idea. Well, actually, you have lots of ideas, Irene, but this most powerful message is that love is a life skill, and we can teach love and that love can be taught in schools. And so, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Wow, thank you for that beautiful introduction. My heart is so full, and I'm just so grateful to be here with all of you. Thank you for having me, for giving me the opportunity to share my life mission and purpose and vision. And I want this will be an interactive session. So I am so grateful that we have live participants that I hope can partake in this conversation via the chat, also by voice if you so wish. And I always like to start by saying that lovescaping is not just something that we do, it's first and foremost who we are, right? So it's about being a lovescaper, a practitioner of love in action. And it is truly a philosophy of life, a way of life based on this idea that love is an action. So I know we all said this, but I really want to reiterate this message. Thank you for being here. Whether you're here live or you're watching the recording, your time is your most valuable and precious resource. So it means so much to me that you're making time to be here and learn about lovescaping. So, my name is Irene, and I am the author and founder of Lovescaping, and this is my life's work and vision. And I invite you on this journey today. This is an invitation for us to really pause and reflect. And I always like to start with the words of one of my favorite humans who's ever lived, Maya Angelou. She said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." And I want to invite you to share in the chat, what do these words mean to you? What words, what feelings, what thoughts come to mind when you read and hear Maya Angelou's words? And you may also unmute and share via voice if that feels better. So you have two options, the chat or share verbally with your voice. Thank you, Crystal. Learn from your mistakes. I love that. It's this idea that we're all learning and we're lifelong learners, right? And we learn from the things that, the mistakes we make, the challenges, the things that go wrong for us. We give grace to ourselves and others. Thank you, Lindsay. I love that idea of extending more grace, that we're all doing the best we can, right? Acknowledging that. And also, I'm thinking of self-compassion when you use that word grace, right? It's like really, instead of being self-critical and judgmental, we extend ourselves that grace and that compassion to say, okay.
Afton and Rio and Isabel and Lillian, please clean up.
And we have, oh, just remember to please mute your mic if you're if you're not participating so that we don't have any conversations creeping in or any background noise. So if you wish to participate, by all means, open your mic. But in the meantime, let's keep our mics closed just so that we don't get distracted. Thank you. And we have Casey saying, keep wanting to learn. And when you have learned what you want to learn, continue to strive for new knowledge. So it's this, I love this idea of this striving, and it's this process, and it's a constant process throughout our lives that, okay, I'm a work in progress. And even though I've been doing something for 30 years or 10 years or 5 years, however long, maybe today I learned something that allows me to know better. So then I have an opportunity to do better. And so it's really, I also love to think about humility with these words, right? It's that openness of we're all imperfect and we're all lifelong learners, and we can all learn and we can always do better when we know better. And thank you, Soraya. I love this idea of the try, try, try. I love that. Just never give up. And any child or adult to make a difference in their lives, mistakes are a part of doing better the next time. Absolutely. And what an important message for our children, especially, right? As educators, as leaders, to really extend that compassion, that grace, that understanding of, okay, we can always try again and we can all improve and we can all do better. Thank you so much. And we have Chinea also saying, I agree, committing to lifelong learning as there's always more to learn and the children teach us more and more each day. So there's multiple, sources from which to learn. And this is really the spirit with which I want to invite you into today's session. If there's anything during our time together that allows us to know better, then let us do better. And so with that wisdom, I am going to jump right in and ask you to complete the following phrase in the chat, please. What are the words that come to mind when you see the word love? Complete the following phrase. Love is blank. And it should be very automatic. Just write down the words, the feelings, the thoughts that are coming to your head when you see love. Write them all in the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want you to notice the words that are coming up, and I'm going to read them out loud in a second. Take your time to write down more if you wish to do so. Love is, love is. And we have connection, unconditional, kind, patient, courageous, ongoing, imperfect, caring for others, unpredictable. How do these words make you feel? Accepting. Love is accepting, caring, patient, courageous, imperfect, kind, connection. Thank you. I love this. Warm inside. Thank you. Wanted. I want you to notice any sensations you might feel in your body when you hear those words and read those words out loud. I love that you just went inside. Warm, cozy, comfortable, wanted. We all react positively to these words. It just makes us feel good, even just reading and listening to some words out loud. We're not looking at images, we're not looking at videos, we're only listening to some words that elicit a comfortable, caring, kind, warm feeling inside our bodies. And now I invite you to do the same thing for love is not. So please share in the chat, what is the opposite of love? What is not love? And I'm going to give you a couple moments to share before we read them out loud. And if you are live and you're reading the chat, I encourage you to notice what feelings, what sensations are coming up for you as you see these words coming up. Love is not harsh, doing harm, hurting others' feelings, rude, judgmental, indifference. How do these words make you feel? Angry? When I was reading and seeing the words pop up, it's almost like a tension that I feel in my body too. It's like the opposite of that soft and comfortable feeling from earlier. I've tensed up. It's almost like I can't breathe. We have sad as well, not important, not mattering, unsure. Thank you for sharing. And just notice how, again, just listening, reading some words can elicit such a strong negative response. Like we reject these words. We don't feel comfortable with these words. We feel sad, angry, hurt, tense. And so it is very clear that we are here to love, for love. But where do we learn to love? I want you to take a moment to think about this question, and please share your response in the chat. And if somebody wishes to give a verbal response, I would love to hear someone else's voice. Where did you learn to love? Thank you for sharing in the chat. I see our families, mom and dad, parents, teachers, caretakers. Parents are our first love and often shape how we love others. Family, teacher, family and experiences, grandparents. Thank you for sharing. Notice how so many of the answers have to do with family or parents or grandparents, caretakers, church families. Thank you for sharing. And I would like to know, and you can use an emoji to give a thumbs up. If this is the first time that you've been asked this very specific question of where did you learn to love? Give me, an emoji or raise your hand, signal if this is the first time that you've been asked this question. So I see some thumbs up in the participants. I see a couple. I see more are popping up. The question is raise your hand or give me a thumbs up or an emoji if this is the first time that you've been asked this question. Thank you for sharing. I saw about 5 thumbs up in a group of 24, at least the people who are here live. And this is unusual. Let me tell you why. I've been asking this question for over 9 years now to thousands of people. And when I ask people if this is the first time they've been asked this question, over 90% raise their hand and say, yes, this is the first time I've been asked. And I think that's a problem. And I think this is one of the most important questions that we need to ask our society, our humanity. It's a rare question, it's an unusual question. And that's why this is the beginning of this journey. I think this is the most important question because we shouldn't assume that because a human being is born into this world that they're going to learn love at home. Those of us who learned love at home are very lucky, are very fortunate, right? But what happens when I grow up in a home where I'm told that I'm loved and I'm abused, for instance, and I grow up thinking that love is abuse? Or what is the definition of love that is actually being taught at home or in my community? Is it taught? Is it explicitly taught? How is it demonstrated? What is the definition and the actions associated with love that are shown and are taught? And so, not everybody has the opportunity or the experience to learn love at home, but we all have to go to school, right? And so, lovescaping comes from a place of lived experience. And my first teacher of love is my oldest sister, who we call Tuti. I'm originally from Venezuela. And growing up, she was, she is still the personification of love in the world, in my opinion. Tuti is differently abled. She has a very extremely rare condition. And Tuti is an eternal child. She is completely pure and innocent. And she taught me how to be compassionate and empathetic and patient. And the most important thing that she taught me is that there's no such thing as being normal. She taught me that every human being, every one of us, is unique and different. And we all become enriched when we embrace one another. So I took those seeds that were planted in my heart from a very young age and left my home country over 20 years ago. And in that time, I've had the great privilege and opportunity to live, work, study, volunteer in these very different places around the world, from Europe to Africa to Asia to Central America, and now here in North America, always dedicating myself to service, community development, education. And what I learned from all this living and loving across differences is that love transcends all differences, and that love is not a feeling, love is an action. And that became the foundation of my philosophy of life, which I birthed when I came to the US to get my master's in education. I basically did a research project of my life to uncover what were the ingredients that made love possible across all of these different places. And that's how the 15 pillars of lovescaping came about. It was a process of really putting my life lived experience into a framework, into a theory, and now back into practice. So this is my humble attempt to operationalize love and define love so that we can teach it. Because it's very hard to teach something that's abstract or that's not defined. And so when I looked at all these different experiences, living with so many different people from different parts of the world, what allowed us to love one another was the presence of respect, care, honesty, communication, empathy, trust, patience, compassion, liberation, humility, vulnerability, solidarity, hope, gratitude, and forgiveness. And if you notice, I would argue that these 15 pillars are actually values, universal values. But in a way, we sort of take them for granted. The same way that question at the beginning, where did you learn to love? We sort of just take it for granted and assume that people will learn to love at home. We sort of assume that these values will also be taught or learned somehow. But these are the values that make love possible. If you think about it, there can't be love without respect, right? Without honesty, without trust. So they're all like puzzle pieces or like instruments in an orchestra. We all need to play them harmoniously to produce a beautiful melody. They're the pillars of a temple that needs to stay strong. And when one pillar falters, the temple's unstable. So we can all learn to practice these pillars, and they're teachable skills that we can all improve upon. And really, it comes from this realization that love is the essential condition of our humanity. In other words, I believe that there is no humanity without love, and that love should be the most important purpose of education because love is a basic human need. And we get hurt in relationships and we heal in relationships. So that's why our role as educators, as people who work in communities with children, with families, we have such an important role because we can literally we can make such a big difference in the relationships that we build that can be healing. Because again, we don't heal in a vacuum. We heal in the context of our relationship. And so it is my personal mission and vision to teach love as consciously and intentionally as we teach math, reading, and science. What if love were a subject in schools? What if the same way we learn math, reading, and science from pre-K all the way through 12th grade, we had a dedicated class called Lovescaping, Love, where we actually taught these 15 pillars. And that is the work that we've been doing over the past 8 years in Houston and beyond, bringing the Lovescaping framework to communities in schools, community centers, jails, companies, any community where there's human beings, there's the need to connect. So I want to play with you. I want to play for you a very short clip of that kind of succinctly summarizes this idea that we have such an important role to play in the lives of others because we get hurt in relationships and we heal in relationships.
So.
So we can all become that spark for somebody else when we lose it. And our mission, our goal is to address what I believe is the root cause of all the problems in the world, and that is absence of love in action in our systems, our educational systems, our societies. When we think about big societal systemic issues from poverty, inequality, racism, xenophobia, all of those are a direct result of lovelessness, right? And so the solution is quite simple and quite obvious is love. And I think the interesting thing is so many of us agree that the solution is love, that the answer is love. We've been singing this, we've been saying it, but going back to that question, where do we learn to love and how do we teach it? And that's where Lovescaping comes in. We believe that we can teach these 15 core pillars as life skills, as core skills to build our self-love and our build healthy relationships. Now,
Irene,
oh yes, go ahead.
Irene, I just have a question for you. I think, and this is something you talk a little bit about in your TED Talk too. It's that aversion that people have to the word love, or that sort of embarrassment, or that romanticized idea of love. And I just love, I love, I so appreciate the point that you make in your TED Talk that love isn't that romantic. We're not talking about that romantic kind of love, right? Um,
Correct.
that love can not only be learned, it's also a skill that we have to practice, right?
Absolutely.
And that, as adults in the classroom, this is in Montessori education, we talk about the prepared adult, about doing that inner work before we step into the classroom. And I know that's something that you incorporate in your lovescaping approach, right? To the whole school. And in your TED Talk, you talk about, the role that every single person on that campus makes, the impact in the lives, not only of the children, but of the parents and for one another, how we create those cultures in our schools where everyone feels loved, seen, heard, and accepted. So I wanted to interject that before you go on because I wanted to clarify that, we all know this, and yet sometimes we're so reluctant to use this, four-letter word, this four-letter L word, that somehow we're, embarrassed by that, or it's not as professional as
Right.
some of the other jargon that we may hear in the education landscape.
I completely agree. And I think it's about time that we are unapologetic about reclaiming love and calling it what it is and not shying away or feeling embarrassed or feeling or being afraid. I think the biggest barrier is fear, right?
Yes,
And I always like to say, actually, love is the opposite of fluff. When people think, oh, it's love, it's romanticized, it's peace and love. And you know what? It's love is hard work. Love is
yes, love
the
is hard work.
hardest work there is. I mean,
Amen. Yes, I
it's the
totally
most
agree.
important work, right? And when you break it down, it is hard. Fear is
It's hard.
easy. Fear is easier. It's easy, right? And fear
That's
is very
right.
powerful. So it's a choice we get to make. Are we going to operate from love or are we going to operate from fear? And
Yeah.
what I hope is that through the lovescaping framework, and thank you for that interjection because it is about really recognizing that these 15 pillars, it's again, like I said, it's my humble attempt to define love. By no means am I saying this is the right definition of love and we should all abide by it. In fact, humility is the first pillar, and it's back to those words by Maya Angelou: when we know better, we can do better. But it's an
That's right.
attempt to make love very actionable and have a method for knowing what it is to also know what it isn't, because oftentimes we might be end up in unhealthy, toxic, or abusive relationships because again, we don't know what love is. And so
Right.
through these 15 pillars, it's a helpful guide to know, okay, if there's disrespect, if there's ingratitude, if there's no solidarity, if there's possessiveness and jealousy, that's the opposite of liberation. Love liberates.
Right.
And so it's a helpful framework to think about how we show up in the world and how we love one another. Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
love that Soraya is also saying that we can teach these by being a role model. And I love that you did that in your classroom and all your children felt safe, wanted, cared, and respected. And I wish every educator out there were like you, Soraya, because it seems so obvious and like of course that's what we need, but and yet we don't see that happening in every school. And I
Right.
think we model it, we embody it, and we also name it. This is what respect looks like. This is what empathy is. This is what gratitude sounds like. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And I just wanted to kind of say that lovescaping is not only based on my lived experience, but it's also rooted in research and best practices. And it's sort of going back to this theme and what you're saying in the chat, Soraya. I mean, we know through secure attachment theory that every child needs at least one adult in their life with whom they feel safe. And that adult, the beautiful thing, the hopeful thing about this research is that if they don't have that at home, any other adult that plays a significant role in their life, like a teacher, a mentor, a coach, can become that secure attachment and literally shift the trajectory of that child's life. That's why our role is so important. And everything we've learned about neuroscience and what's optimal for development and healthy development, and everything we've learned about how we learn, how learning happens, we know that feeling safe is a prerequisite to learning. And so we need to feel, we need to create that safe environment in school so that we're able to learn everything else. And furthermore, we know that trauma and adversity are widespread. Through the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, the ACEs study, we know that ACEs are highly, highly common. And we know that the buffer to that is, again, trust, love, kindness. And so every human experiences one, at least many forms of adversity, right? And trauma is an individualized experience, but it's that acknowledgement that whoever comes into a school, not just children, but adults, teachers, administrator, parents, there is a need to create these loving spaces of belonging so that we can heal. And when we heal, we can thrive. And to Lindsay's point, we do incorporate, that's why we believe that lovescaping is not just for the children and for the students. Like, it's first and foremost for ourselves, right? So we have to heal ourselves, we have to work on ourselves. And so we have several elements that really involve everybody in the learning community. And what this means is we're all learning, it's like learning a new language, this language of love in action. And so for students, we have a year-long curriculum that covers all the pillars. It's a class every day. We have circles and pillars, and I'm going to go into the circles shortly, and we're actually going to do one virtually. And we have also a multi-tiered system of support. What does that mean? That if a specific child needs individualized, more personalized support, we have a whole system to map that, to communicate that, whether it's to the school counselor, the social worker, so that that child can get the support they need. And we also have restoring lovescaping circles. That means that when there's a harm that's been done, when there's been an incident that needs to be addressed, we don't just punish and expel. We deal with it in a way, in a lovescaping way, meaning we take responsibility, we use communication, we use trust. So how can we restore and rebuild that relationship? So we teach how do we address conflict, right? And not just punish. And we do the same thing with teachers. So teachers are actually going through the lovescaping sessions throughout the year. So they're also getting to bond. They're also benefiting from the sessions. They're becoming lovescapers. And we do the same thing with the families as well. So the parents, caretakers also come in, and we have our circles, we have our pillars, and they have materials that they can take home and really embody this at home as well.
And Irene, I think really another point that I would like to interject with students, when we talk about accepting responsibility, guiding them to build new habits, right? Guiding them to build new strategies for dealing with stress, for dealing with frustrations that they might have with a classmate. So we don't just send them to timeout and expect them to somehow figure out how to do things differently. There are practical strategies and uh, practice built into the system so that children are learning new behaviors that they don't have access to prior to this.
Exactly. And in fact, that's why we start with self-regulation. And
Mhm.
self-regulation is a prerequisite to practicing all the pillars. Because if I don't know how to manage my emotions, and that's why, and it starts with the adults, right? If
Right.
I don't know how to manage my emotions, if I get triggered and I'm upset because I'm a student, I feel disrespected by a student, I need to be able to self-regulate and model that and teach that in order to respond instead of react. So the same way we teach students those skills, and it
Mhm.
becomes a shared common language and a culture. I'm taking responsibility for my response. So I'm going to take a moment to breathe or to ground myself or to tap so that I can self-regulate, so that I can respond from a place of love instead of react from a place of anger or fear. And so, how do we create a lovescaping space? And these are just some of the core elements that you can start implementing today in your home, in your classroom, to be more intentional about creating spaces of belonging and loving spaces. And our first step is creating agreements. And I recommend you create agreements as a classroom, as a team. And notice the question that we use to create agreements. It's this: what do you need to feel safe in this space? What an important question. It's not what do we need to be the most effective learners or to be, the most responsible students. It's what do we need to feel safe? Everything we do at Lovescaping is intentional. And creating agreements as opposed to rules is key, right? Because everybody gets to share. And oftentimes, the needs that come out are very similar. And you see in this example here, there's, sort of kindness or no judgment or confidentiality, being open, accepting. But starting our time together with these agreements really builds trust, and then we hang it and we use it as a tool to guide our behavior. So if during the year, during any day, we feel like somebody is not following an agreement, we call each other in about it and address it. And we create that chain with our names on it to have that visual representation of our agreements, and also to represent that we are all interconnected and the actions of one impact us all. So if I'm disrespectful to you, to Lindsay, for instance, I'm really disrespecting the whole group. And so we have the agreements as a shared values for what do we need to feel safe. And it is such an important question and such an important conversation to go deeper. And so we start creating our agreements, and then we have our lovescaping circles, and we always sit in a circle. Please share in the chat what words come to mind. What does a circle represent? When you see people sitting together in a circle or the shape of a circle, write down what words come to mind. What does a circle symbolize or represent? So we have unity. Yes, I love it. Unity. What else? Thank you. Togetherness. Yes. Share more. You're welcome to share any more words that you want. Unity, community, togetherness, belonging. I love that. We all belong in a circle, right? There's no hierarchy in a circle. We are all equal in a circle. And so again, we want to embody those words physically. We want to be united. We want to be together. We want to belong. We can all see each other. Nobody's in the back. Nobody's at the front. We all belong. We are all one. And in this lovescaping circle, we do something very simple. And this is such an important practice. We start by asking the same question. The first question is always the same. And it's, how are you feeling today? And again, this is a question that we take for granted. We are always on autopilot. How are you? I'm fine. I'm good. We cannot use fine and good because those are not feelings words. We want to expand our emotional vocabulary. And we also want to be open and vulnerable and honest, because we can't be fine all the time. And it's okay to feel whatever it is that we're feeling. So it's an invitation to identify our feelings, name them, and share them, and just validate them. And then we have a question of the day that changes every time. And this is an invitation to get to know one another. So, for instance, today's question of the day is, what is a recent memory that brings a smile to your face? So I would love to get one or two people to share, and you can share in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, I would love to hear a voice. Just answer both questions of the day. How do you feel? How are you feeling? And what is a recent memory that brings a smile to your face? Thank you, Lindsay. You feel energetic, and your time with your grandson, recent memory that brings a smile to your face. Thank you for sharing. And you may share in the chat too, if that's better, if that's more accessible. And I'll share with you while I'm waiting for your responses. Today, I feel relieved and I feel grateful. And a recent memory that brings a smile to my face is dancing merengue with my 3-year-old daughter. Um, Thank you. And we have Marisa feeling tired and hopeful. Thank you for sharing. Eating an nasturtium flower from your yard. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Marisa. And I encourage you to replace the buts with ands. And you will be surprised at how it expands. Because sometimes when we use, you're tired but hopeful, imagine saying tired and hopeful. You're giving validity to both of them. You're not taking away from one or the other. So I always love to replace the buts with the and just it just gives it more depth, and it kind of validates all, whatever it is, all that we're feeling. So thank you so much for sharing. And if we were in person, we would all be sitting, in that circle, passing a talking piece around. And even from these few answers that we received, it's like we get a little window into each other's lives. So it doesn't take much to spark a moment of human connection when we make the time and we're intentional about it. And so it's again about the intentionality behind it. And if we do this practice regularly, you would be surprised at how much we can learn about each other, bond, and build trust and build empathy. And then we have the Lovescaping curriculum, which is very specific lessons and activities and exercises around the 15 pillars. So, as I was mentioning, we start with self regulation, but then we go into how am I humble? How can I be humble? How can I be empathetic? How can I improve my communication? How do I build trust? How do I set boundaries? How do I forgive? How do I practice gratitude? Again, these core values that make love possible. And of course, the curriculum is differentiated by age, and it really is built on very concrete and experiential activities that allow us to practice the pillars and embody them. And thank you also for sharing in the chat, Soraya, your moment when you saw the wow moment and then heard, I did it. I love that. I love that. And I'm assuming that was from your students, a recent moment that brings a smile to your face. Thank you so much for sharing. And even that, just sharing these moments, it's bringing a smile to my face, reading about your joys. And so again, it's simple. And I always like to say these principles and these concepts are simple, but simple and easy are two different things, right? It's simple, but it's hard work, as we said earlier. And so I want to kind of go to the end, wrap up our session with 3 core lovescaping principles that are very important, that really allow us to practice the pillars. And I've already mentioned the first one, which is intentionality. Everything we do is intentional. So, can you please share in the chat what is one action that you are intentional about in your life? Anything at all that you do with intentionality. Please share in the chat. I love that, Lindsay. We have calendaring time for self-care. And that we can all learn from that, right? Like the same way we have a calendar for our meetings and our lessons and everything we do, our work, our responsibilities. What about our responsibility to ourselves and to our self-love and our self-care? So just putting it there. This is my me time and I'm going to recharge. I love that you do that with intention. And Margaret says connecting with loved ones. So that's whether that's via phone or text or seeing them in person, but just being very intentional about connecting with the people that you love. Thank you for sharing. I love this, Chris. I work hard on affirming others. So being intentional about the words that we use and when we use them and how we use them to elevate and edify and affirm others. That's beautiful. And so think about the things that you do with intention. And I want you to think about how you come to be intentional about them. And I'll leave you to think about that for a second, but I'm going to ask another question. So, how did you come to be intentional about that? And we have going out for tea with a friend. I love that, Soraya. Thank you for sharing. And Chinea says, holding my boundaries so I don't feel stretched thin. And that's huge. Good for you. And thank you for sharing. And really seeing the people I encounter as well, says Marisa. So, and that's so important, right? Because there's nothing, I think the most painful thing is to feel invisible, right? And ignored, and to feel like nobody notices you. And so, even to acknowledge a human being and to see them in the eye and greet them and know their name is huge. And so, when you think about the things that you're intentional about, I would bet that a lot of them come from some form of unlearning. So think about something that you've had to unlearn in your life, because the same way we learn things, life is a work in progress, a process of learning and unlearning. And so please share something that you've had to unlearn, and perhaps it's related to the thing that you do with intention. Oh, I love this, Soraya, how to say no. And it reminds me of Chinea's comment about holding my boundaries, right? So I wonder if that even to you came from an unlearning. Thank you for sharing. I've had to unlearn people pleasing. Yes, yes, and that's huge. And a lot of that, comes from childhood experiences. I had to unlearn keeping my true self hidden. Yes. And notice how, I mean, these unlearnings are huge. This is no easy feat. I think this is the hardest work, the work on self, right? Of how we become more self-aware of where we need to unlearn and how we become intentional about doing something a different way. And I'm just stopping to read a recent moment of joy that was shared in the chat, which is wonderful. It says, one of my students, 18 months old, stopped in the middle of our walk and said, hug. She reached up and gave me a warm hug. Great way to start the day. And that fills my heart too. So notice how, again, we are strangers here, but even through these very, simple moments that you're sharing here, I'm getting a glimpse into your life. We're building a connection. And thank you all for sharing your unlearnings and your intentional actions. And what happens when we do this work, the work of unlearning, the work of becoming intentional, is this is the work of self-awareness. It's truly the work of looking at ourselves in the mirror and questioning. And that's why I started with that question. Where did you learn to love? It's an unusual question, but it confronts us with this realization that, okay, where did I learn to love? And what is my definition of love? And how do I show love? And the more I question, the more open I become to, okay, maybe I need to unlearn, like Chinea said, you have to unlearn people pleasing. That's not loving towards myself. I need to set boundaries, right? I need to say no. And whoever loves me for who I am will love me for who I am, period. Right? And so I become open to unlearning, and then I become intentional about being or doing who I want to, becoming who I want to be, and doing what I want to do, like setting time for self-care in my calendar, right? And in that process, I become a more self-aware individual. So I love to call this the virtuous cycle that happens when we are intentional about the way we want to show up in the world, of practicing love in action, to become open to unlearning where necessary. And that helps us become more self-aware individuals. And I want to bring back Maya Angelou's quote, because I think these three words actually are, it's this quote in a nutshell, right? Because I'm doing the best I can until I know better, but then I'm open to unlearning. When I know better, okay, I can do better. I become intentional, and that way I become a more self-aware human being. And so I'd like to wrap up with Ubuntu, which is a concept that I learned about when I lived in Mozambique. And Ubuntu comes from the Bantu languages of Southern Africa, and it's the literal translation is a person is a person through persons. In other words, I am through you. I am because you are. That's the most often, the most, kind of widely accepted translation in English. I am because you are, I am because we are. And the beautiful thing about Ubuntu is that there is no other. Because when I am, because you are, and we're all recognized that we're interconnected, there's an inherent interconnectedness in our world. And so the actions of one impact us all, going back to the agreements. And it's really this realization that if we really carry this understanding with us that we are all connected. And when you are well, I am well. When you're not well, I'm not well. And we can all lift each other and we can all, be caring and kind. And it's this ripple effect that, it will change the world. That's the spirit with which, I really hope that we can build a better humanity, that our interconnectedness and the actions of one impact us all. So I have a lot of materials to support the Lovescaping journey. As Lindsay said at the beginning, I recently published my children's book, which I'm so excited about. It's called I Am a Lovescaper. It's a series of 15 stories, one for each one of the pillars. It's an interactive book. And we also have different materials. Everything's in English and in Spanish. And these are just some images of what a lovescaping space looks like with children, with youth, with adults, with families, in correctional facilities. And I am so lucky that I get to do this work, the work of love, the work of hope, because we all have the ability to heal and do better when we know better. I'm also proud to announce that we became an approved continuing professional education provider by the state of Texas last year. And so you can take our course if you're in the state of Texas, our online course for educators, and get 12 hours of CPE credits. So, and even if it's not approved in your state, you can still take the online course and bring lovescaping to your classroom, to your community. And here's the children's book. But I just like to end by closing our time together with just one word or takeaway that you're left with after attending this session. And I want to say thank you, everyone, for participating and sharing in the chat. It really, I love learning a little bit about each and every one of you. So please share a word that you're left with. And I see hope and I see, oh, I love this eye-opening circle. Unconditional love is a key to a peaceful environment. Thank you, Soraya. This is beautiful. So please share your takeaways in the chat, and I'll just leave you with my contact information. If you want to learn more, visit our website. You can email me. My books are available on Amazon. I also have a read out loud of the children's book on YouTube that's free and available for anybody to see and watch. And the illustrations are animated through AI, so it's quite cool. It's very cool and engaging. So there's lots of ways to support the Lovescaping journey, the Lovescaping mission. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Lindsay and Tim, for giving me the space.
This has been absolutely beautiful, Irina. And Lindsay, thank you again. You find the best guests. Irina, if you could stay on for a moment or two after we stop recording, I'd love to chat with you just a little bit. I'd like to see an article from you in our magazine, and we have a Montessori Family Alliance that reaches families directly. And certainly, I want teachers to know about your online course. This is really lovely. And you are Leo Buscaglia for our current generation. For those of you who remember Leo and Love 101. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much. Anyone else? Any last words from anyone else? And then Lindsay, of course, last words.
Just thank you, Tim. And again, Irene, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your vision of a better tomorrow. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Really.
Thank you. Thank
Love,
you.
love indeed is the answer.
That's
Last
right.
words from anyone? Hearing none, then I'll stop the recording. Thanks, everyone. Irene, I'm going to